Hey, what's up everybody? This is Dr. Andrew Kim M.D. and today's video we're going to take a break from our usual psychiatric educational videos and we're going to talk about the recent Netflix sensation, Squid Game. That's right, today's video is on Squid Game's characters and why they are so relatable. So if you have not watched this is your one and only spoiler alert warning. Don't watch this yet, go watch the series, then come back and let's talk about the characters. Now for those of you who have watched this, you know at this point this is a global sensation. People are obsessed with this. And one of the aspects people are obsessed about is talking about the characters, ranking them from the most likable, the most hateable. Now there are some critics who feel like, you know, this whole show is about pointless violence and they say these characters are basically a bunch of stereotypes that were thrown together and they lack no depth. I actually disagree because if you kind of watch carefully and follow these characters and notice the different subtleties, I actually think even though they were kind of typecasted into these stereotype roles, whether it's the character themselves or their backstories, there is a layer of depth and complexity that makes them so relatable, and that relatedness is what makes them so likable or hateable. So let's jump right in and talk about a couple of the minor and major characters, and let's see what you think. So the first one we're going to talk about is Jang Deok-Su. So Deok-Su, on face value, is kind of that stereotypical gangster bully. He uses brute force, intimidation, violence to get what he wants when he wants it, right? So again, on face value, he kind of reminds you of a bully that you may have kind of experienced at some point in your life, and you have this like visceral reaction, remembering a bully in the past or witnessing some bullying happening, and it kind of draws you in to root against him and root for the little guy. Now look, if that's all you think, then you're missing some of the nuances. If you follow his character, they clearly show you points where he's vulnerable and he displays fear, anxiety. He's just as insecure as all the other characters and worried about how he's going to make it through this crazy life and death game. And that reminds us, right? People who kind of take this role of bullies in real life, that's the same way. That use of violence, force, intimidation, it's really a defense mechanism, an unhealthy defense mechanism to cover up those vulnerabilities, those insecurities, in not the healthiest way, okay? And it reminds us that all of us at some point, when we have felt out of control or vulnerable, we've probably done some irrational decisions, unsavory things outside of our character to kind of exert a sense of control, just like Deok-Su is doing. So I'm not saying that he's relatable because you're all gang leaders, but I'm saying there's probably been times where you've tried to exert control or did something out of character to kind of cover up your own insecurities. Okay? The next character we're going to talk about is Abdul Ali. Abdul. We all have this soft spot for him because he's kind of that shining light of purity in all this mucky, dark, evil, you know, kind of the evil theme in Squid Game. He's kind of this pureness and the shining light. He's strong on the inside and the outside. He not only has physical strength to kind of help people out and save people in different games, help in tug of war, but he's got this strong internal kind of character of loyalty, right? Kindness, you know, respectfulness, right? These characteristics that, you know, are things that you are hoping to find in Korean culture, yet it's his kind of story arc that's fascinating. I wish we got more of it, but we only get this little teaser that he's an undocumented worker. And despite all this stuff, he's so noble, he's trying to provide for his family, do whatever it takes, put in hard work, long hours, but he's getting exploited by this kind of hyper-capitalism that's taken over Korea. He hasn't been paid in 6 months. And despite, you know, all that nobleness, right, he gets pushed into a corner, and in a moment of desperation, he, you know, tries to snatch that money from his corrupt supervisor. And that's what kind of lands him in trouble and spirals him into participating in the Squid Game. And so I think not only do we kind of admire and put him on this pedestal for all his goodness, but for those of you out there who come from immigrant families, I think that story arc and backstory is relatable. Look, my family, my grandparents came here to America trying to live the American dream. They came and they lost everything in Korea during the Korean War. They worked so hard doing manual labor to provide for themselves and to hopefully give their kids a better future. So a lot of people are saying they relate to this story arc, and that's where there is a layer of depth there. The next character we're going to talk about is a more minor character, Mi-Nyeo. Again, on face value, some of the critics say, well, she was just put there for comic relief. She's this snake that you just want to hate. She'll say and do anything to survive. And that's really her role. But again, if you follow her character and listen carefully, there was one moment that some blog writers out there picked up on, and I actually agree with this, where she makes a comment that says, look, I'm really bright. I just never had a chance to go study. So this kind of is this classic character arc that we find in a lot of Korean movies and Korean dramas. The bright child who has this huge potential bright future ahead of them but can't get fulfilled because of life circumstances. They can't afford an education, something happens, gets in the way, and then they kind of get into trouble, convert that brightness into kind of street savvy or street smarts, and that's kind of this tragic series of events that happens, okay? So on one hand, people say she's fulfilling this kind of stereotype in Korean movies, Korean dramas, but look, that happens in real life, okay? How many stories do you know, whether it's your own story, stories of others that you know in life, that there's kind of this unfilled, untapped potential, and life circumstances kind of derailed you from your original life plans or your life goals. Some people kind of get back on track. Others, tragic series of events can occur. The other aspect of her character that I find intriguing is that you can see she's very good at reading the room. Now, people say that's because she's kind of a snake and she's devious, but look, she can read the room, she can read body language, facial expressions. To me, that indicates kind of that tragedy I was talking about. I'm inferring and would guess, if we had a chance to get more of the backstory, she's had a lot of trauma in her life. And trauma can make you hyper attuned to people's facial expressions, tone of voice, body language. And sometimes that could be a strength. You can read the room very well. Other times it could be something that gets in your way because you can misinterpret and misperceive abandonment that's not actually happening, rejection that's not actually happening. And you get a sense this is a woman who has gone through trauma. She wants to just be loved. She wants to belong. And she's tired of being thrown aside, mocked, cast aside. And there's this longing of wanting to be loved and needed. That's what makes her story so tragic but relatable as well. The next character we'll talk about is the other female character, Kang Sae-byeok. Now, Sae-byeok kind of initially starts off as this woman who's kind of aloof, kind of quiet. Some might think that, she's, somewhat cutthroat as well. But as you get to know her character, the audiences start being pulled in and start rooting for her because she represents someone who is being driven in difficult circumstances with a clear sense of purpose, okay? And she has this noble purpose of wanting to kind of provide and rescue her brother from his situation, be able to bring her mother, from the north so they can all be reunited and live together. Who can't get behind rooting for that? I bet you in the audience there are people that are saying, look, as a mother, as a father, as whatever, to my loved one, I would do anything to protect them. I would do anything to provide for them, even if it's going to be some unsavory stuff. If I'm pushed to the limit, I will do whatever it takes to protect my loved ones, to provide for my loved ones. So right there, she's already a very relatable character. You're drawn in and you're kind of rooting for her, okay? And again, some critics are saying, oh, look, that's a stereotype. We always have one of those kind of dark, brooding hero types that you end up rooting for. But look, there are layers and there's kind of this complexity with her as well. For those of you who don't speak Korean, it's obviously hard to pick up on this, but a lot of native Korean speakers have commented on this, that in the scenes where she's with her brother, She's someone who's come from the north, from North Korea, and is speaking with her brother in a dialect or accent that's kind of more from North Korea. But when she's with the other members in the Squid Game, she kind of drops some of that accent and kind of talks more in a, I guess, South Korean dialect or accent, so that she basically doesn't stand out. Okay, she doesn't want to be that odd person out. She doesn't want to be noticed or judged because of her background or where she's from. And if you were able to pick up on that subtlety, think about that, right? So she has kind of this willpower, right? She's fighting gangsters. She's willing to kill, right? She's willing to put a knife to people's throats to do what it takes, right, to provide and protect her family. So look at all that strength. You're like, gosh, she's such a strong woman. Yet there's this layer of insecurity. I don't want to be noticed, and I don't want to be seen as different. I don't want to stand out. That could get me in trouble, right? I don't want to be seen differently. I don't want to be judged. Come on. How many of us can relate to that? We don't want to be, we have fears and insecurities about being different, standing out, whether it's our religious backgrounds, our cultural backgrounds, issues with our sexuality, right? That is a very relatable aspect of this character. So go back and watch it again and see if you could pick up on this. And this is, I think, another reason why people relate to her and can root for her, in addition to the obvious superficial level of strength that she displays. Now, let's wrap up with a couple of the main characters. First, let's talk about the protagonist of the story, Seong Gi-hun. It's easy to see why from the very beginning, as we get introduced to the character, why he's so dislikable, okay? He's a degenerate gambler. He's mooching off his elderly, ill mother, takes the mother's money, steals it so he can go gamble more, can't even be responsible enough to take his own daughter out to fulfill his duties as a father, screws up her birthday. He's just kind of this, impulsive, degenerate gambler that just keeps making poor choices for himself and digs himself a deeper and deeper hole. Sadly, this is very relatable because we're human and we're flawed. And don't tell me there isn't someone out there who could be like, man, I have made plenty of poor decisions, impulsive decisions, even when I know it's probably going to screw me even more, yet I keep going back to that well, okay? Interestingly, when he goes into the Squid Game, he kind of has this character revival, and he starts manifesting a lot of characteristics that he probably would want to manifest in his actual life outside of the Squid Game. He's very accepting. He's inclusive of other people, okay? He is forgiving, and there are moments of forgiveness throughout the series that he displays. In addition to that, he shows kind of this, willingness to befriend people, loyalty, and you're just like, man, where is this Gi-hun when you're on the outside with your mom, with your daughter, right? But there's also an interesting phenomenon where he kind of has this kind of character revival with all of these qualities, but when he's pushed up against the wall in that marble game, right, he uses trickery and deceit when it comes down to it, and he's feeling overwhelmed and vulnerable and scared, okay? And it just reminds us again that's life, right? I mean, we have our low points, we have our high points, and even when we're kind of on this high, things are going well, we're still human and we're flawed. And sometimes we're going to fall short of what we aspire to be. But you know what? He has resiliency. And that's the other part I think is great. They show that he, after becoming basically catatonic after winning the Squid Game, you see right at the end of the series that resiliency, that resolve. Some people will argue maybe he's just being a degenerate gambler and risking things again, but you know what? Either way, he's able to bounce back and he's resilient. So it kind of follows the ebb and flow of human nature, and this is why he's relatable. Now, the last character we're going to talk about is Cho Sang-woo. So Sang-woo kind of is that stereotypical character in Korean movies where he's the pride and joy of the family, the talk of the town. He's like the valedictorian. He's the one who's going to leave this small town and make it big. And again, this draws us in because we probably can relate to that, whether that's you in your life, someone in your family, someone you know. And you may be on one side of the fence saying, oh, I was just so happy for them. Or you may be on the other side of the fence saying, I'm jealous, they're not that angel that everybody thinks they are, but you get drawn in from this kind of character stereotype. Now, some people have labeled Sang-woo as a sociopath, cold-hearted sociopath. I really disagree with that. I think it's pretty clear that he's not necessarily this like emotionless sociopath. You see moments where he struggles with emotions and struggles with his morality, right? Whether it's in moments where he gives that money to Abdul Ali when he sympathizes and feels bad for him, even in that moment where he does end up trying to screw over Gi-hun and others, you know, in that game where they have to carve out the shape in that cracker, you know, he hesitates and you can see he struggles. It's just, I don't think he's heartless and emotionless. He's just someone who's lost his way, right? That moral compass kind of went off the rails and he's become so jaded in this kind of corrupt system. And it's not that he's blameless by any means, we know that, but it's sad, and you can kind of, you know, sympathize with him and see there's nuances to him. He's not just some stereotypical like sociopath, okay? Now, we also see that he kind of realizes that he's lost his moral compass, and he struggles with that early on in the series, throughout it, you know, here and there. And he's also a victim, you know, of kind of this system where he says, I know it's a rigged game on the outside and even within Squid Game. I'm going to work within that system, milk it, do what I can to win. But he's also conditioned himself to become kind of, you know, trapped in this system where he sees money as like the ultimate solution to life and his problems, right? He struggles with it when they're voting early on to kind of escape the game and get out alive. He wants to stay. He wants to win the money, even though it's going to risk his and other people's lives. And at the end, some people say, oh, it was so noble of him to, you know, basically take his life so that Gi-hun could take the money. On one hand, maybe, but on the other, some people say, well, again, it's another example where he says, if I can't have the money and be rich, then it's pointless and hopeless. So you can argue and debate that last point, but this is, again, where, you know, I think he's a character who has such nuance and depth where he's not just this plain old sociopath. And if you kind of really watch carefully, you see that he's someone who just struggles and has lost his path, lost his way. And that can tragically happen to any of us over the course of our lives. So look, I know we didn't touch on every character, but I wanted to at least go over some, talk about some of their superficial stereotypes of what they represent, but also more of those layers of depth and why I think we get drawn to them, why we like them, why we hate them. And the director did a great job of pulling us in to want to learn about and focus on these characters. So in the comment section below, let me know your thoughts. Which characters did you find the most fascinating? Which do you like the most? Which do you despise the most? Tell me why. What layers of nuance did I miss? Tell me the angles you saw and what you found fascinating or interesting about these characters. So again, Dr. Andrew Kim, I hope you get a chance to, you know, watch this video and join in on the discussion below. But let me know your thoughts. I figured why not? Because everyone is talking about this right now. Until next time, Dr. Kim, hope you guys are doing well. Bye-bye.